Hi guys, it's Kelly here and I'm back with another video. Today we are using this edged floral. This is the exclusive Pinkfresh Studio stamp that's being released for STAMPtember by Simon Says Stamp. In addition to that, I'm also using some of their other products. This is the delicate foliage, the stamp and the stencil, as well as the Here For You. I actually ended only up using the stamp. I didn't end up using the die. So let's talk making multiples. So first, I like to start with having all of my card panels cut. Mine are all an A2 size card panel. And then for this particular one, because we're doing a kind of like an ombre, I do like using the ink cube families because the lightest to darkest is already picked for me. These just recently came in to my craft room, and these are the new 1-inch blending brushes by Picket Fence. So I'm going to be trying those for the first time. And then these are the 1/2 inch. These I'm going to use for the stenciling. So here we go. They're really, really soft, really, really fluffy. And I just have the ink cubes in the Pinkfresh inks. I don't have the full pad. And I have to be honest with you, I was pretty impressed by how well they covered and how soft they blended out. Because you can see on that edge that I'm blending out into white, there's no really harsh lines. But on the right-hand side where I'm trying to get color, like that's the lightest color. Normally with the lightest color, I really, really have to work to get good coverage. Now, whether or not that's their inks or their brushes, I am not 100% sure, but I can tell you the combination made it really, really easy to do a lot of these backgrounds. So total, I made 10 cards. Here, I am just double checking that edged floral that I'm going up high enough with the ink blending. And I do this kind of large batch making whenever I need a lot of something. So, in this case, it's thank you cards. That is what I need a lot of. And so that's how I chose the color palettes as well. I was looking for something that was a little bit more subdued for my thank you cards. And that's also why I chose like the foliage. I just think leaves are like just a really... There is some imagery that, you know, a lot of like nature and things like that. Oh, here I got ink on my finger and then I got it on my card background, but that's okay. I just went right over top of it and you won't even know it's there. But I think that there is just certain type of imagery, mostly like nature and things, that you can just use for anything. You know what I'm saying? You could just use it for anything. So I really like having like a good leaf set on hand. I do have to tell you, because this is a STAMPtember exclusive, the edged floral is a first come, first serve. They will not restock it. Because I am behind just because of the day that I had today. Well, 2 weeks. Y'all, September's been a month. But anyway, that is the stamp and die combination is sold out. But I do always try to include in the videos, just in case you're watching this, like, you know, a year from now, like I do try to include other ones that will be available. So the delicate foliage, it is part of it has its own suite. That's how Pinkfresh does all of their products. So there is a stamp, a die, a stencil, and I can't remember if that one has a press plate or a hot foil plate, but it's one or the other. And those are always available. The Sentiments, the Here For You, I know is a press plate because that's pretty new. So anyway, you don't have to do what I'm doing here in order to successfully make large batches of cards. You don't have to use 4 colors. You don't even have to ink blend if you don't want to. You could definitely build up this kind of gradation with just one color. But I like having the 4 right there and it makes it easy. And then for these ones, if you guys have watched my videos, you have heard me say, like, I always do my ink blending twice. You guys, I didn't. I didn't blend it twice. I only did it once, even though this is sped up quite a bit. You know, when I'm done and I move on, that's it. I only did it one time. So yeah, big fan. Though I will say the price point is, it comes with 3 brushes, and I think it's $18.50 for the 3 brushes. So somebody else math, because you know your girl's not good at it. I do not be mathin'. But I do this because I get very bored with making the same card over and over again. So this is a way, by switching up the color palette or switching up, like, to have 2 different stamps. That's how I keep myself kind of engaged and interested when I need to make multiples of something. But you could just pick one or the other. So, I mean, that's just, you can make it as labor intensive or as interesting as you want, but you could also go the other way and still have a perfectly good, pretty card, you know, that you could give without all of the extra things that I'm doing, like using 4 colors of ink. So I just try to be transparent with you guys. You know how that rolls. So here I did choose the 5 different colors. So I made 10 cards total, and I don't even know if that's going to be enough. I might have to go back and do a different version of a thank you card. But these it's not an embossed resist because I did the embossing after the fact. Sometimes you just have to know your inks. And for these ones, truthfully, I really don't know. I know that they're dye inks, but I don't know if they will stain the white heat embossing. And I knew that I was going to be using like darker colors, so I didn't want to risk it because I was making so many. You know, like, I try to do my experimenting when it's just 1 card at a time. But so I did wait. Now you could possibly do the stamping first, especially if you're using like something that cleans up with water, like Distress ink or whatever. That would definitely work. So there's 2 of each of the colors, and then we are going to heat set them. This is because I'm doing the heat embossing second. That I'm doing my ink blending first. So you got to make sure there's no moisture. There's nothing for that heat embossing to stick to. Alternatively, if you did not want to mess around with heat embossing, you could stamp these tone on tone. So, you know, stamp the green and like the stamp green background, like the dark green, like we're going to do with the sentiment, and that would still look very nice. Here what I'm doing is I'm just using a clear embossing powder that I have in a large tub, and I am checking to make sure that all of them are dry and that embossing powder is not sticking to them. That step is so important before you get to the stamping, because if it's not completely dry and you stamp it and put on that embossing powder, like, you're kind of stuck. So the next tip with the large batching is a stamp positioner. Not all of us have these. I totally get that. If you don't have one, then you can use a grid mat, you know, where you kind of line it up on your glass mat, or, you know, what do they call them? Like the ones that you can cut on, self-healing mat, and you can line it up and then see how you need to position your acrylic block, or it was a Stamp-a-majig back in the day, but Fiskars had one, a press, that you could also use. But in using this, like I'm using the Misty, in using that, I am able to line it up on those lines, and this is one of the sticky mats in the background, so that even though I am stamping at one time, and I am using the Calico White from Pinkfresh, that's their white pigment ink. Another tip is make sure that you're using the correct, then this applies for all card making. Make sure you're using the correct embossing powder for what you want. These are very intricate designs, which is why we don't have to do much to them to make them really pretty. But that means that if you're going to be doing some heat embossing, this is not the time for super chunky glitter, because it's just not going to look nice. So I'm using a white detail, which means a white detail embossing powder, which means it's really fine. I mean, it's finer than like sand, so that it's going to stick to those lines and melt down really nicely, but not blow out our design. So with this, I can just put my paper back in the same exact spot. I always double check it because I am paranoid. And then I treat with my anti-static tool and go ahead, ink it up. And again, I stamp these twice just because I do have that, that ability with the stamp positioner. So why not, you know, measure twice, cut once kind of deal. So I do like to stamp mine twice, and you'll also see with the embossing powder that I like to kind of dump that on twice as well. But again, if you don't, I understand that embossing powder is a lot, like these steps. I think it's worth it because I think it's really pretty. You could also do a metallic, you know, if you were looking for something that was a little bit more kind of over the top. You know, the gold with the, like the purple or the green would look really, really nice. But anywho, you could just stamp them in the regular colors. You know, that would be whatever color inks you're using, and do a tone on tone effect, and that would also look pretty. So now the same thing applies with this delicate foliage. Here's the interesting thing about this particular stamp though. So you have the stamp and you stamp it down, but the stencil adds in, it doesn't just color the leaves that you stamp, it adds in more leaves. So right now we're going to go ahead and stamp this, you know, in that same white, and then heat emboss it. You know, we're doing everything the same way that we were doing before, but for these ones, we're going to add in the step of the stenciling. And I gotta tell you, I think it looks really cool. I really like the way that this one looks because there's more variation in the colors. And you have some that have lines, some that don't have lines. So big fan of that. Big fan of that. But here I'm just showing you that, you know, it lines up the same exact way, just like before. And then we can make sure you're treating it with your anti-static tool. And then go ahead, ink it up, stamp it down. And one thing to note, like you can see how like the powder is starting to stick to my sticky mat. I just wipe that off with like my microfiber, like when it's wet, I just wipe it off. Or you can take it to the sink and kind of lightly wash it to get rid of that powder, and then just let it air dry and it'll become sticky again. So now that all of these are stamped and heat embossed, I am going to go ahead and go in with the stencil and just line them up. I will tell you that this was kind of like my learning piece. So I went in with the lightest color, which I believe is sage in this particular green combination. And so I went in with the sage, and I pretty quickly learned that that was not going to be dark enough for me to be happy with it. Which is fine. That's fine. You know, we have to kind of eyeball it and see, you know, and do those experiments so that we know going forward. So the first one I did the sage. For every other combination, I used the darkest 3. I did not use any of the lightest color after this particular experiment that I tried here. So now you can see I'm going in with that, what is it, eucalyptus, I think. And I'm like, okay, I'm taking this all over. So that way it will be darker and I will be happier with the results. So for this one, there's only 2 stencils in this set. So for this one, you know, I kind of did like a darker to lighter gradient in that same diagonal. For this one is the one that doesn't match up with any of the lines. So it can be a little bit trickier to line it up. That's why I pulled my packaging out on the left-hand side. Don't be afraid to look. Pinkfresh always has those pictures on the back of their packaging, and they can be super helpful in lining up or how things should look or what color to do what layer with your stencils. And so for this one, because it's so few, I just did the darkest color. And I was really happy with the way that they came out. And then I just continued on. I obviously cleaned the stencils in between. So that way I wasn't going to be kind of cross-contaminating, since they are, fairly monochromatic. Well, not fairly. They are monochromatic cards. They don't have any other colors on them. So I just went through and did that. For this piece of it, this is a me thing. I do like having that little bit of extra pop. So this is something that all of it you can do or not do, because it's your card and it's going to be beautiful because you're going to make it and you're going to be happy with it. But I do like to add a little bit of detail. So the one on the right there, that blue one, isn't that such a pretty blue? I love that blue. But that one, because of the stenciling, it has more variation. This one has a little bit less. I mean, we still have the color gradient, but we have just the white embossing. So what I did was I chose a darker color that still matched, still in that monochromatic theme of things. I just went in and added a little bit of darkness kind of to the base of the leaves. I didn't color in any of the flowers or, outline anything or add any other shading. I just went in with one color. If you go over top of your white heat embossing, you will color the heat embossing. To clean that, just go in with your 0 marker, go over top of it, and then scribble it off on a piece of scrap cardstock. You don't want to keep going back in, or you can redeposit that color. So I did it also here on the leaves that were not stenciled in at all. I did add just a little bit of darkness, and I did that for all of them. Once again, I just used one color. Here's me doing the blue one in fast speed and super fast speed. But I just thought this added, just a little bit of extra dimension. Definitely something you can leave off if you're like, girl, I have no interest in doing that. That's too finicky. Like, that's great. That's what, makes our cards different, because we're all on our own, journey doing our own things. So now that everything is done and the coloring is done, I have switched to my mini Misty. This will work in a regular size Misty as well. I was just too lazy to clean mine. So here I have my sentiment where I want it to be. I have lined up my card in the bottom left-hand corner, so it's pushed against the left side and against the bottom. And this was the first time I stamped it. So I did stamp it 3 times. That's not necessary once it's kind of seasoned. For the other ones, I only stamped it twice. But as long as I keep lining up my card in that bottom left-hand corner, so it's in the same spot, I don't even have to move my sentiment. I can just clean it off in between with my microfiber cloth. And then I do stamp mine twice, ink them up and stamp them. And the same is true for this one with the delicate foliage. I've put this thank you kind of in the top left-hand corner. I could have flip-flopped them, like had the leaves kind of trailing down and the sentiment in the bottom right corner versus the top left. I did think about that, but I was like, girl, you gotta keep pushing and get these done, because you need a lot of thank you cards. But that is an option as well. So really like that. That thank you script. I like that bold thank you. And then after this, I have a problem because I cannot leave well enough alone. I wanted there to be something that was a little bit shiny or shimmery, but I did not want to put rhinestones or pearls on every card. I wanted them to be flat for mailing. So I am going to do some splatters, spatters, whatever you want to call them. I know they're not for everybody. Again, skip them if they're not for you. But I put the thank you stamp over top of the sentiment to protect it. And then I am going to mix some perfect pearls with a little bit of water, spatter that onto the background. And then I am also going to use a wet paintbrush to mix into my Copic opaque white ink. And I'm going to spatter that as well. And this goes by really fast. Like just one right after the other. It's a pretty quick process once you've kind of mixed them both up. Just you know, try to remember to put that stamp there to cover it so you don't get like a big white splotch in the middle of your H or, you know, something like that that would make it illegible. But then that's it. So these are all of the cards that I made. In their different color combinations. It was, I think it took me about 2 hours to make all of them, which is normally how long it takes me to make one card. So I hope that this was helpful to you. I hope that you will check out the STAMPtember set if you're interested. If you're seeing it later, you know, that's okay. You can do this with whatever you have. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I appreciate your time, and I will catch you on the next video. Bye.